Hello and welcome to The Buddha and the Coach, powered by Soul Performance Academy. I am your host, Dan Mickle. The Buddha and the Coach is a weekly vlog focused on looking at the teachings of the Buddha through the coaching lens. The Buddha and the Coach is proud to be sponsored by It's Called Normal Athletics. ICN Athletics helps make the extraordinary ordinary through adaptive beach volleyball. And they believe that everyone should have the opportunity to join and excel at that sport, and ICN offers the programs and the education to make it normal for adaptive athletes to play on any court. Help them make beach volleyball court a place for everybody. For more information or to make a donation to the 501c3, please visit icnathletics.com. It's called Normal Athletics. Thank you again for your sponsorship, and amazing work being done by John and Dave, and it's great to see everything happening there in the adaptive athlete and adaptive sport world, and just love the work they're doing, so make sure you check out their site. All right, lesson 17 of the Buddha is: happiness comes when your work and words are of benefit to yourself and others. I know I say this every week because they are all great, but I really do think this is a great one. And I think a lot of it comes from the fact that we talk a lot about coaching burnout and burning out our players. And I think this one kind of hits straight the heart of that. I think a lot of times as coaches, we lose sight of why we're doing it. And I get it. When we ask people, hey, why do you coach? We always get the answer, I'm doing it for the kids, I'm doing it to give back to the sport. It's usually a pretty positive and canned message. But the truth comes down to it, a lot of times that doesn't happen. Even though we say that's why we're doing it, when we're in the heat of the battle or we're in the grind of the season, we lose sight of that. And we start working really hard for those wins, for the clout, for the reputation, for the championships, for the banners, all that stuff. We start working and grinding and making that our goal. And then all of a sudden, the sport that we love starts to feel like a job. Now, I get it. For some of us, coaching is a job. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't love it and shouldn't be just knee deep in it. But the problem is there's just a lot of times that when we do that, we start to get focused on the win-loss and the percentages and the records and the banners. And it starts to sort of become tedious. We lose that sense of joy, what got us into the sport or into coaching to begin with. And I think we need to have regular check-ins. And I'm not talking beginning of the season, end of season, middle of season. I'm talking about weekly at the minimum, where we check in and say, how am I working and what am I doing that is a benefit not only to me, but also to my players in the community? Am I chasing and working so hard on those victories and the natties and the banners that I'm forgetting why I'm doing this? And that's what leads to burnout in a lot of coaches. We start to look at the numbers and the analytics and the history, and are we living up to it, that we forget about all the work, good work that we're doing working with these players at any level, whether you're U12 or professional. Your job as a coach is really to make people better. That doesn't just mean better in your sport or your craft. It just means better people. And sometimes that doesn't show up on the scoreboard. Sometimes that doesn't show up in the win-loss columns. And that can be tough. But it's when we lose sight of that it starts to eat away at us. And once we go down that path, it's really hard to get off of it and get back to the true happiness. So my suggestion is each week, at the minimum, maybe you want to do it every couple days, just check in with yourself and say, how is what I did this week or today a benefit to me? How is it a benefit to those around me? And most importantly, how is it a benefit to my players and my team? And again, I'm challenging you to go beyond, well, did they win? Did they lose? Did they play well? How did you transfer some of your knowledge that's going to help them down the road? How did what you worked on today make them better citizens of the world down the road? And again, I think this is kind of where we get lost in sports. It is possible to be super competitive, super successful, but still be aware of the benefits that you are giving to yourself and to your team and to those around you. And like the lesson from the Buddha says, that's what's going to bring you happiness. We've all had those rough seasons. But can you find happiness in that? Sure, maybe it wasn't the best in the win-loss column. Maybe you lost that big game. But did you do it with integrity? Did you do it so that they learned something? Did you do it so that you learned something as a coach? And are you coming away a better person from that experience? And if you reflect and look back and say, I'm not leaving this week a better coach than I entered it, or I'm not leaving the season as a better coach than I entered it, then you have to look at your priorities. What are you valuing above other things? What is the most important to you? And this goes beyond just having a simple coaching philosophy, because it's really easy for us to each year have a coaching philosophy, type it out and put it out there. But it's really hard to look back and say, in the moment, did I follow that? In the moment, was I true to that? Because that philosophy is what should make me happy. And if I'm not happy, that means I probably went off of my philosophy somehow. Either I made decisions that went against what I truly believe in my core, or maybe it just meant I didn't express what my philosophy is, or maybe my philosophy differs from that of the players. And those are all workable things. You know, we can't be naive enough to think that we're going to go into every season, everyone's going to be on board with everything. But those of you that see me speak and talk about other things know that I'm really big on buy-in doesn't require consensus. We don't need the whole team to agree with every decision, but we need them to agree that they know it's coming from a good place. Even if they disagree with it, they know that the reasons for it are coming from a good place. And I think that's kind of where this lesson hits on, is when we start to teeter away from doing things that come from a good place because we want to get those quick wins. Or maybe we want to land that one recruit that would really help our team, but it kind of goes against some of our philosophies. They don't match up very well. And we think that, okay, well, once they're in the program, we can make it work. And sometimes it just doesn't happen that way. But that's when we start to lose happiness. If you think back about, as a coach, when your happiness sometimes starts to decline, it's not always because of the record or how things are going in that sense. A lot of times it's because you're struggling with conflicts between what your true philosophy is and what you're allowing to let happen. Maybe you're making decisions to benefit you, and it doesn't benefit your team. Maybe you're waiting to have those tough conversations that you should have had at the beginning of the season to get it over with and make sure everyone's on the same page, versus having them later in the season when everyone's invested a lot more time and effort into it. Having that tough talk at the beginning of the season is always a lot easier than having that talk at the middle or the end of the season. And it's not because the words are different. It's just because between that start and the point that you have that conversation, a lot of people have put a lot of work into it and it's not working out, or it went a different direction. So ask yourself, is your work benefiting you, and is your work benefiting others? And sometimes they're not always on the same page. And that's where you have to figure out, how do I get that on the same page? How can I get it to benefit me and benefit them? And that's where the compromise happens. And that too can be tough. But if you want true happiness, you want things to benefit both you and your team or your program or those around your program. And there's a lot of moving parts to that. Players, parents, boosters, administration. It's tough. You're not always going to make everyone happy. But you need to look at that and say, where is the happiness that I'm bringing, and how can I bring it to more people? Doesn't mean you can't be tough. Doesn't mean you can't push your team or your staff or even yourself to make them better. Just means if you're doing something that isn't a benefit to you or them, what value is that? That's what's going to burn you out. Making teams run just to run. Running plays just to run plays. Going 2.5 hours at practice because you have the gym for 2.5 hours versus going till you get it done and what you want to accomplish and maybe ending a little early. These are all the things that we have to look at. They seem so small at times, but these are the things that build up and cause the burnout. So here's my challenge to you. This next season or the season that you're in now, at least once a week, put it in your calendar with a reminder. Take 10 minutes and ask yourself, what we did this week, how does it benefit myself? How does it benefit my team? And how does it benefit my program and those around us? How is what I did, how is what I set the tone for and established a benefit to myself and those around me? Because that's when you'll find happiness. It's when you're doing something over and over again, you're not even sure why you're doing it, is when we burn out, and that's when we have the problem. Take the time, check in with yourself. Don't just assume that you'll know when things are wrong or you're struggling. Then it's too late. Take that time once a week, check in with yourself, and find out what benefits you had to yourself and your team this week. All right, there you have it. Lesson 17 of the Buddha. Happiness comes when your work and words are a benefit to yourself and others. Peace, much love, don't suck, and I will see you all here next week for Lesson 18.